I just walked out of the Superior Court of Virginia with shaking hands, but not from fear. My mother, usually the picture of elegance, just collapsed inside the mediation room. She and my father spent 2 years trying to prove I manipulated my grandmother into leaving me her $6.8 million estate. They thought she was a senile old woman, but that secret video I just played proved she had turned her mansion into a giant trap. My name is Willow Kestrel. I am 28 years old, and for the last 4 years, I have spent more time with dead artists than living people. My world is the quiet, dust-mote-filled air of the Restoration Lab at Ethelgard Arts, a sanctuary where the smell of turpentine and aged varnish masks the scent of my own loneliness. I fix things. I take canvases that time has cracked and forgotten, and I bring them back to life. It is precise, solitary work. It requires a steady hand and a heart that does not crave conversation. It was the only life I wanted, or so I told myself, until the phone rang 3 days ago and shattered everything. The voice on the other end was not my mother or father. It was the housekeeper at Silver Oak Estate, her voice thick with tears, telling me that Beatrice, my grandmother, the only person who had ever looked at me and seen a human being rather than an inconvenience, was gone. A massive stroke, she said. It happened in the library. I drove through a blizzard to get back to Virginia. The wipers of my sedan fought a losing battle against the sleet, slapping back and forth like a metronome, counting down the moments until I had to face them. My parents. The drive took 11 hours instead of the usual 6, giving me plenty of time to dissect the hollow ache in my chest. I did not cry during that drive. The tears felt frozen inside me, trapped behind a dam that I was terrified to break. If I started crying for Grandma Beatrice, I was not sure I would ever stop. She was the anchor. She was the queen of Silver Oak. And now, the queen was dead, and the gates were open for the invaders. Silver Oak Estate loomed out of the gray mist like a beast of stone and ivy. It was a sprawling manor, built with old money and maintained by sheer force of will. As I pulled into the long, winding driveway, I saw the cars, dozens of them, sleek black limousines, luxury SUVs, vehicles that cost more than I made in 5 years at the gallery. The vultures had arrived early. The funeral service was a masterclass in performative grief. It was held in the family cemetery on the estate grounds, a plot of land worth millions on its own, surrounded by weeping willows that seemed to be the only living things actually mourning. I stood at the back, wearing a simple black wool coat, my hands shoved deep into my pockets to hide their trembling. At the front, near the open grave, stood my parents, Elena and Marcus Kestrel. They looked like they had stepped out of a magazine spread for a gothic romance. My mother wore a custom-made Givenchy veil that was just sheer enough to show her perfectly waterproof mascara running down her cheeks. My father, in an Italian suit that probably cost $10,000, held her arm with a grimace of calculated devastation. Flashbulbs popped from beyond the cemetery gates. The press was there. Of course, Elena had made sure of it. Socialite Beatrice Kestrel, dead at 87. The headlines would read. My mother sobbed loudly as the mahogany casket began its slow descent into the frozen earth. It was a theatrical heaving sob that echoed off the stone mausoleums. It was disgusting. I watched them, feeling a cold nausea rising in my throat. I remembered the last time I saw my father cry. It was when he lost $50,000 on a horse race. I had never seen him cry for a person. When the service concluded, the crowd began to disperse toward the main house for the reception. I stepped forward, finally allowing myself to approach the grave. I wanted to drop a single white rose onto the casket, a tradition Beatrice and I had shared. She loved white roses. She said they were honest because they couldn't hide their flaws. As I reached the edge of the pit, my mother broke away from a condolence handshake and glided over to me. She smelled of expensive perfume and gin. Up close, her eyes were dry, sharp as shards of glass. She leaned in, ostensibly to embrace her grieving daughter for the cameras zooming in from the perimeter. Her arms went around me, stiff and cold. Her lips brushed my ear, and her voice dropped to a hiss that only I could hear. "Don't embarrass us, Willow," she whispered, "and don't think your little display of sorrow is going to buy you anything from her. You are just a step-grandchild in spirit. If not in blood, you were never one of us." She pulled back, patting my cheek with a gloved hand, offering a tragic smile to the onlookers before turning away. I stood there, frozen. The rose crushing in my grip, the thorns bit into my palm, but the pain felt distant. Step-grandchild. That was not a new insult. It was the soundtrack of my childhood. The memory hit me hard, transporting me back 20 years. I was 8 years old, sitting on the grand staircase, watching my parents leave for a month-long vacation to the French Riviera. They hadn't even said goodbye. They just left instructions with the third nanny of the year. I had been crying, feeling small and abandoned in the cavernous house. Beatrice had found me. She didn't coddle me. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She took me by the hand and led me to her art studio. She handed me a piece of charcoal and a sheet of heavy paper. "Crying ruins the makeup, darling, and it solves absolutely nothing," she had told me, her voice stern but her eyes warm. "If you are in pain, put it on the paper, turn it into something, and stand up straight. You are a kestrel. We do not slump." She taught me to draw. She taught me that shadows define the light. She taught me that the people who share your DNA are not always your family. She was the one who paid for my art school tuition when Marcus refused. She was the one who visited my tiny apartment in the city when I got my first job, drinking cheap tea out of a chipped mug and telling me she was proud. And now she was in a box, 6 feet under the frost, and I was alone with the wolves. I turned from the grave and walked toward the house. The reception was in full swing in the great hall. The room was suffocatingly warm, filled with the scent of lilies and roast beef. Waiters navigated through the crowd with silver trays of champagne. The room was packed with people I barely recognized. Distant cousins, business partners of my father, friends of my mother, who I knew for a fact had gossiped about Beatrice's mental state for years. They were clustered in small groups, their voices a low hum of avarice. "I heard the collection is worth over $3 million alone," a man with a red face was saying near the fireplace. "The land is the real prize," a woman in a fox fur coat replied, sipping her drink. "If they rezone it for commercial development, Marcus could make a fortune." They weren't mourning. They were appraising. They were vultures circling a carcass, picking the bones clean before the body was even cold. I navigated through the sea of black suits, looking for a corner to hide in. That was when I saw him, Arthur Sterling. He was standing near the library doors, looking like a relic from another era. Arthur had been my grandmother's personal lawyer for 40 years. He was a man of few words, carved from granite and old-world integrity. He held a cane, though I suspected he used it more as a weapon than a support. Our eyes met across the room. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a wave. He simply nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. His eyes were heavy, filled with a mixture of sorrow and something else, something sharp and alert. It was a look of complicity. He knew. He knew what these people were, and for a fleeting second, I felt like he was telling me to wait, to be patient. I started to move toward him, but a sharp voice cut through the air. "There she is." The room went silent. I turned to see my mother standing on the landing of the grand staircase, holding a crystal flute. She looked down at me, her face flushed with the perfect amount of dramatic indignation. "Everyone, I just want to thank you for being here," Elena announced, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "It is so hard to lose the matriarch of our family, especially when—" She paused, looking directly at me with a look of pained disappointment. "Especially when some of us couldn't be bothered to be here when she took her last breath." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. All eyes turned to me. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, not from shame, but from rage. "Willow," Elena continued, descending the stairs like a tragic heroine. We called you for hours. Your grandmother asked for you. She wanted to hold your hand, but you were too busy painting. Or whatever it is you do in the city, you let her die alone. The lie was so bold, so breathtakingly evil, that it knocked the wind out of me. They hadn't called. My phone had been silent all day. I had checked the call logs a dozen times. The housekeeper had called me 2 hours after Beatrice passed. Elena had deliberately blocked the information, just so she could use this moment to paint me as the villain. "I didn't know," I said, my voice sounding thin in the cavernous room. "You didn't call me." "Oh, stop it," Marcus chimed in, stepping up beside his wife, shaking his head with exaggerated disgust. "Don't lie to cover your guilt, Willow. It's pathetic. Just eat some food and try to show some respect for the woman whose money you're probably hoping to get." The crowd stared. I could see the judgment in their eyes. To them, I was the estranged, ungrateful daughter, the cold-hearted artist who ignored her dying grandmother. Elena had won the narrative before I even opened my mouth. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash the champagne glasses and tell them about the missed calls that never existed. But I heard Beatrice's voice in my head. "When the storm comes, do not run. Stand still in the eye." I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. I did not scream. I did not fight back. Not yet. I simply turned around and walked out of the great hall, leaving their whispers behind me. I wandered through the corridors of the mansion, the house I had grown up in but never felt at home. My feet carried me instinctively to the west wing, to the only room where I had ever felt safe, Grandma's art studio. I pushed open the heavy oak doors. The room was freezing. The heating had been turned off. It smelled of linseed oil and old paper, the same scent as my lab, but richer, deeper. The easels were covered in dust sheets, looking like ghosts in the dim light. I walked to the center of the room and hugged myself, trying to stop the shivering. It was quiet here. The noise of the vultures downstairs was just a dull thrum in the floorboards. I looked around at the walls. They were lined with portraits, decades of my grandmother's work, sketches of the gardens, oil paintings of horses, and charcoal drawings of me as a child. I stood in front of a self-portrait she had painted 5 years ago. In the painting, she was sitting in her wheelchair, but her back was straight, her expression fierce. Her eyes in the painting seemed to lock onto mine. They were piercing, intelligent, and fiercely alive. For a moment, the silence of the room felt heavy, charged with a strange electricity. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It wasn't the feeling of being haunted by a ghost. It was something more tangible. It was the distinct, prickling sensation of being watched. I turned slowly, scanning the room. The shadows stretched long across the floor. The eyes of the portrait seemed to follow me. I wasn't alone. I didn't know how I knew, but I knew. Beatrice was gone, but Silver Oak was watching, and for the first time since I arrived. I didn't feel entirely defenseless. I felt like the house was holding its breath, waiting for me to do something, waiting for me to find something. I took a deep breath of the cold, turpentine-scented air. Let them drink their champagne. Let them lie to the press. They thought the story ended with the funeral. They were wrong. The story was just beginning, and I was the one holding the pen now. The heavy oak doors of the library shut with a sound like the closing of a tomb, sealing us inside. The air in here was different from the rest of the house. It did not smell of funeral lilies or expensive perfume. It smelled of leather bindings, furniture polish, and the terrifying weight of judgment. There were only 4 of us left. The distant cousins and the fake friends had been ushered out, clutching their memorial pamphlets and whispering about the buffet. Now, it was just the core cast of this tragedy. My father, Marcus, my mother, Elena, Arthur Sterling, the executor, and me. My parents sat on the velvet sofa, their posture rigid. Marcus was checking his watch every 30 seconds, his leg bouncing with a nervous energy that vibrated through the floorboards. Elena had touched up her makeup, but the mask was slipping. Her eyes darted around the room, cataloging the first editions on the shelves, the Persian rug under our feet, calculating their auction value. They looked like predators waiting for the dinner bell. I sat in the high-backed wing chair in the corner, as far away from them as possible. My hands were folded in my lap. I felt cold, a deep, marrow-seeping chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. Arthur sat behind Beatrice's massive mahogany desk. He looked small against the backdrop of floor-to-ceiling books, but when he opened the leather folder in front of him, he commanded the room with the gravity of a hanging judge. He adjusted his spectacles, cleared his throat, and looked at us over the rim of his glasses. "I will dispense with the formalities," Arthur said, his voice dry and crackling like parchment. Beatrice was quite specific about how she wanted this done. She updated her will 3 months ago. Marcus stopped bouncing his leg. 3 months ago?" he asked, his voice sharp. "I thought the last update was in 2022. "She made amendments," Arthur said simply. He looked down at the document. "I will begin with the minor bequests." He began to read. $10,000 to the local animal shelter, $5,000 to the Historical Society, a stipend for the gardener, a small pension for the cook. My parents exchanged a look of impatient tolerance. They were tapping their fingers, sighing audibly. To them, this was just the appetizer, the boring legal preamble before the main course was served. They were waiting for the millions. They were waiting for the land deeds. Arthur turned the page. The sound of the paper turning was the loudest thing in the room. "And now, to the distribution of the primary estate," Arthur read. My father sat up straighter, adjusting his tie. My mother leaned forward, her lips slightly parted. "To my granddaughter, Willow Kestrel," Arthur said. My name hung in the air. My parents froze. "I bequeath the entirety of the Silver Oak estate, including the main house, the grounds, and all outbuildings," Arthur continued, his voice steady. "Furthermore, I leave to Willow Kestrel the sum of $6,800,000 in liquid assets, the full portfolio of stocks and bonds, and the complete private art collection." For a solid 10 seconds, nobody moved, nobody breathed. It was as if the oxygen had been sucked out of the library. My brain could not process the numbers. $6,800,000, the house, the art, everything. Then, the silence broke. "Excuse me?" Elena's voice was high, pitched like a dog whistle. She let out a short, incredulous laugh. "I think I misheard you. Arthur, you said Willow gets what?" "Everything," Arthur repeated, not looking up. "She gets everything." "That is impossible." Marcus stood up, his face draining of color. "That is absolutely impossible. Mother promised me the estate. We discussed it. We have plans for the land." "The will is clear," Arthur said. "But I have not finished. There is a specific section regarding her son and daughter-in-law." Elena sank back onto the sofa, clutching her chest, looking relieved. "Oh, thank God. I knew it. She split it. It is a trust arrangement. Is it not? We control the assets until Willow is older?" Arthur looked at them. For the first time, I saw a flicker of dark amusement in his eyes. "To my son, Marcus, and his wife, Elena." Arthur read, "I leave the antique Venetian mirror that hangs in the guest hallway, the one with the crack down the center." "A mirror?" Marcus whispered. "A broken mirror?" "And," Arthur continued, "I leave you the sum of $500. $500,000? Elena asked, desperate hope clawing at her voice. $500, Arthur corrected her. "And there is a personal note attached to this bequest. Would you like me to read it?" "Read it," I said. It was the first time I had spoken. My voice was hoarse. Arthur looked directly at my parents. The note reads, "I leave you this mirror and this pittance so that you may finally look at yourselves and see exactly what I saw for the last decade. Cheap, fractured, and empty." The explosion was instantaneous. Elena screamed. It was a primal, ugly sound that tore through her sophisticated facade. She grabbed the crystal water glass from the table beside her and hurled it across the room. It smashed against the wall inches from Arthur's head, showering the books in shards of glass and water. "You lying old bastard!" she shrieked, leaping to her feet. Her face was contorted, the veins in her neck bulging. "You forged it! You and that little bitch wrote this yourselves!" "Elena, sit down," Arthur said, unflinching. "I will not sit down," she yelled, pointing a shaking finger at him. "Beatrice was senile. She did not know what she was doing. She thought the mailman was the president last week. You took advantage of a confused old woman." "She was perfectly lucid," Arthur said calmly. "Liar," Marcus roared. He was not looking at Arthur. He was looking at me. The look on his face was terrifying. The suave businessman was gone. In his place was a desperate, cornered animal. His eyes were bloodshot, his teeth bared. He charged across the room. I did not have time to stand up before he was on me. He grabbed the lapels of my coat and hauled me out of the chair. Slamming me back against the bookshelf, books tumbled down around us. "What did you do?" he screamed, his spit flying into my face. He shook me so hard my teeth rattled. "What did you do to her? You poisoned her against us. You whispered poison in her ear." "Get your hands off me," I said, my voice shaking but surprisingly loud. "Did you drug her?" Marcus shouted, tightening his grip on my coat, choking me. "Did you make her sign this when she was high on painkillers? Tell me the truth, you ungrateful little parasite. We gave you life. We put a roof over your head." "You gave me nothing," I yelled back, shoving at his chest. "You left me alone. That is all you ever did. Marcus, unhand her immediately." Arthur's voice boomed like a cannon shot. He had risen from the desk, brandishing his heavy cane like a club. "If you do not step away from her, I will call the sheriff, and you will spend the night in a cell." My father glared at me, his chest heaving. He looked at Arthur's cane, then back at me. With a growl of frustration, he shoved me away. I stumbled but caught myself on the arm of the chair. Marcus turned on Arthur, running his hands through his hair, pacing frantically. "This will not stand. Arthur, do not think for 1 second this will stand. This is fraud. Pure and simple." Mother was not in her right mind. Arthur reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sealed document. I anticipated this reaction. "This is a certificate of mental competency, signed by Dr. Evans, a neurologist, and Dr. Klein, a psychiatrist. Both examined Beatrice privately on the morning she signed this will. They attest, under penalty of perjury, that she was fully cognizant, oriented, and acting of her own free will. There is video evidence of the signing as well." He held the paper out. Elena snatched it from his hand. She didn't read it. She stared at it with hatred, her hands trembling violently. Then, with a scream of pure fury, she ripped the paper in half, then in quarters. She shredded it until it was nothing but confetti, throwing the pieces onto the Persian rug. "Paper!" she spat. "It is just paper. I can buy 10 doctors to say she was crazy. I can buy the whole damn hospital." "That was a copy," Arthur said, watching the paper flutter to the floor. "The original is in a safe deposit box in Zurich, along with the video." Elena walked over to me. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She stopped inches from my face. She looked wrecked. Her mascara was smeared. Her hair was coming loose from its pins, and her eyes were black pits of malice. "You think you have won," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "You think because you played the dutiful granddaughter role, you get to steal our birthright? You have no idea who you are dealing with." "Willow, I am dealing with my parents," I said, meeting her gaze. "Which is the saddest part of all." "We are not your parents," she hissed. "Not anymore. From this moment on, we are your worst nightmare. I will sue you in every court in this state. I will tie this estate up in litigation for the next 20 years. You will never see a dime of that money. I will drain every account you have fighting us." I will drag your name through the mud until you cannot get a job sweeping floors, let alone restoring art. She stepped back, sweeping her arm around the room. And this house? I will burn it to the ground before I let you live in it. That would be arson, Arthur noted dryly. Shut up, Marcus yelled at the lawyer. He turned to me, buttoning his suit jacket, trying to regain some semblance of dignity, though his face was still purple. You have made a grave mistake. Willow, you have declared war on your own family. And for what? Money? You are just as greedy as you think we are. It is not about the money, I said quietly. It is always about the money, Marcus shouted. Do not give me that moral high ground garbage. You manipulated a dying woman to steal $6 million. You are a thief. A common thief. He grabbed Elena's arm. Come on, we are leaving. I cannot breathe the air in this room anymore. Elena resisted for a moment, her eyes still locked on mine, burning with a promise of destruction. Enjoy it while you can, Willow, she said, because I am going to destroy you. I promise you, when I am done with you, you will wish you had died in that car on the way here. They stormed out of the library. The heavy doors slammed shut behind them, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Silence rushed back into the room, filling the space where their rage had been. I stood there, leaning against the bookshelf, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My coat was rumpled where Marcus had grabbed me. My neck stung. I looked at the shredded pieces of the medical certificate on the floor. Are you all right, Willow? Arthur asked gently. I looked up at him. He had sat back down, looking weary. He looked older than he had 10 minutes ago. They are going to do it, I said. My voice sounded strange to my ears, calm and detached. They are going to sue. They are going to destroy everything. They will try, Arthur said. But Beatrice prepared for this. She knew exactly who they were. She did not leave you defenseless. I walked over to the window. Outside, the snow was falling again, blanketing the estate in white. It looked peaceful, deceptive. Somewhere out there, in their luxury car, my parents were already plotting. They were calling lawyers. They were calling the press. They were sharpening their knives. I felt a wave of fear wash over me, cold and paralyzing. I was 28 years old. I restored paintings. I did not know how to fight a war. I did not know how to survive a lawsuit from people who had millions of dollars and zero moral compass. But then, I remembered the last time I spoke to Grandma Beatrice. She was frail, her skin like paper, but her grip on my hand had been iron. Willow, she had said, her voice a rasp. The world is full of people who will try to make you feel small so they can feel big. Your parents are the kings of that world. But remember this, when the storm comes, and it will come, do not run. If you run, they will chase you. If you run, you lose your footing. You stand still. You stand still in the eye of the storm, and you let it rage around you. You wait, and when the wind dies down, you will be the only one left standing. I took a deep breath. I could still feel the phantom pressure of my father's hands on my collar. I could still hear the glass shattering against the wall. Let them come, I whispered to the window, to the snow, to the ghost of the woman who had saved me. I turned back to Arthur. What do we do now? Arthur closed the folder. Now, he said. We wait for the first strike, and while we wait, I have something else for you, something that was not in the will. He reached into his pocket, but that is a story for later. For now, the war had been declared. The first shots had been fired in the library of Silver Oak, and as I looked at the broken glass on the floor, I realized that my mother was right about one thing. The mirror was broken. The family was broken. But unlike the mirror, I was not going to stay shattered. I was going to be the edge that cut them. 2 weeks later, the war arrived in a thick, manila envelope delivered by a process server who looked at me with a mixture of pity and recognition. He knew who I was. By then, everyone knew who I was. I sat on the floor of my small apartment, The legal documents spread out around me like a fan of razor blades. The language was sterile, precise, and absolutely devastating. The lawsuit filed by Elena and Marcus Kestrel accused me of 3 things. First, undue influence and elder abuse. Second, fraud and conspiracy to misappropriate assets. And third, the intentional isolation of a vulnerable adult. Reading the complaint was like looking into a funhouse mirror designed by a sociopath. Every act of love I had shown my grandmother was twisted into a calculated maneuver. My visits were described as restrictive access sessions. My reading to her was psychological conditioning. The fact that I was the only one holding her hand when she died was framed as preventing the natural heirs from saying goodbye. They were not just suing me for the money, they were suing to erase my humanity. But the legal assault was just the artillery fire. The real damage was being done by the chemical weapons. The media. My mother had hired a crisis management firm known in the industry as the Gravediggers. They were famous for burying reputations, and they were earning every cent of their fee. I walked to the corner store that morning to buy milk. On the newsstand, my face was plastered on the front page of a national tabloid. It was a photo taken years ago at a gallery opening, where I was looking serious and perhaps a bit aloof. Next to it was a photo of Beatrice, looking frail in her wheelchair. The headline screamed in bold, black letters, "The Ice Queen's Apprentice. Did Granddaughter Brainwash Dying Tycoon?" Another paper went with, "The $6 million Nurse. Family Claims Heiress Blocked Them from Dying Mom." I bought the papers, my hands shaking so badly I dropped my credit card. The cashier, a girl I had chatted with for 3 years, looked at the papers, then looked at me. She didn't smile. She didn't say hello. She just slid the card back across the counter with 2 fingers, as if I were contagious. "Receipt?" she asked, looking over my shoulder. "No," I whispered. "Thank you." I walked home with my head down, feeling the eyes of the city burning into my back. That was the genius of Elena's strategy. She didn't just want to win in court. She wanted to win in the court of public opinion. She knew that if she painted me as a monster, no jury would sympathize with me, regardless of what the will said. The fallout hit my professional life 48 hours after the first headline dropped. I was summoned to the office of Julian Thorne, the director of Ethelgard Arts. Julian had been a mentor to me. He was the one who hired me fresh out of school. He knew my work ethic. He knew my character, or so I thought. When I walked into his office, he didn't offer me a seat. He stood by the window, looking out at the gray skyline. "Willow," he said, not turning around. "We have a problem." "It is all lies, Julian," I said, stepping forward. "You know my parents. You know what they are like." He turned then, and his face was hard. "It does not matter what I know. Willow, it matters what the donors think. It matters what the board thinks. We are a prestige institution. We rely on the goodwill of wealthy patrons, many of whom move in the same circles as your mother." He picked up a piece of paper from his desk. "We have received calls. People are uncomfortable with the idea of a person of interest handling priceless heritage assets." A person of interest? I felt like I had been slapped. "I haven't been charged with a crime. It is a civil suit." "It is a scandal," Julian corrected. "And Ethelgard Arts does not do scandal. Until this is resolved, fully resolved, we are placing you on indefinite unpaid leave. Your access badge has already been deactivated." "You are firing me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Because my mother is a liar?" "We are protecting the firm," he said, finally looking me in the eye. "Please clear out your desk. Security will escort you." I packed my brushes, my magnifying glasses, and my notebooks into a cardboard box while a security guard watched me. He was a man named Dave, who used to ask me about my weekend every Monday. Today, he stared at the wall, refusing to make eye contact. I walked out of the building into the rain, holding the box that contained my entire career. I had lost my grandmother, I had lost my reputation, and now I had lost my sanctuary. The isolation tightened its grip in the digital world. My phone, usually buzzing with group chats and casual check-ins, went silent. When I scrolled through social media, I saw that my friend count was dropping by the hour. People I had known since college, people I had shared dinners and secrets with, were quietly unfriending me. I sent a text to Sarah, my best friend from art school. "Hey, can we talk? I really need a friend right now." The message status changed to read, then nothing. 3 hours later, I saw that she had blocked me. They were scared. They saw the news. They saw the legal threats, and they didn't want to get dragged into the blast radius. Elena had made it clear that anyone standing with me was an enemy of the Kestrel family. And in this city, money talked louder than loyalty. My financial situation collapsed just as quickly. I went to the ATM to withdraw cash for rent. Transaction denied. I called the bank. A polite but firm voice informed me that due to the contested probate and allegations of fraud, all accounts linked to the estate, or the suspected misappropriated funds, had been frozen by a court injunction. That included the joint account Beatrice had set up for my tuition years ago, which I used for emergencies. I had $600 in my personal checking account. That was it. I was technically the owner of a multi-million-dollar estate, but I couldn't afford to buy a sandwich. I sat on my couch, eating instant noodles, staring at the cease and desist letters that piled up on my coffee table like snowdrifts. Then came the nights. The harassment began on a Tuesday. My phone rang at 2 a.m. I picked it up, groggy and confused. "Hello?" Silence. Then, a heavy, raspy breathing. "Who is this?" I asked, my heart starting to hammer. "We know what you did to her," a distorted voice whispered. "You're going to pay. Bitch, watch your back." The line went dead. I sat up, clutching the blanket, shaking. I knew it wasn't a random prank. It was psychological warfare. Elena and Marcus wouldn't dirty their own hands, but they had money to hire people who would. The texts started coming the next day. Photos of my apartment building taken from the street. Messages that said, "Are you sleeping well? And she cries in her grave because of you." I stopped sleeping. I pushed my dresser in front of my bedroom door every night. I taped paper over my windows. The apartment, once my cozy refuge, became a prison cell. The walls felt like they were closing in, crushing me. The worst part wasn't the fear of the outside world. It was the rot starting to spread inside my own mind. I began to doubt myself. I sat in front of the mirror in the bathroom, staring at the dark circles under my eyes. I replayed the last 5 years in my head. Had I manipulated her? When I suggested we paint in the garden instead of seeing my parents, was that isolation? When I agreed with her that Marcus was greedy, was that undue influence? Maybe I was the villain. Maybe I was the monster the papers said I was. Maybe I had subconsciously tricked a dying woman because I wanted to be saved from my own mediocrity. "No," I said aloud to the empty room. My voice sounded weak. "No, that is not true." But the doubt lingered, a poisonous seed planted by my mother's narrative. I was breaking. I was running out of money, running out of fight, and running out of sanity. I needed a lifeline. It came in the form of a handwritten note slipped under my door on a Thursday evening. No stamp, no return address, just a time and a place written in elegant, old-fashioned cursive. St. Jude's Park. The bench by the duck pond. Midnight. Come alone. I knew that handwriting. It belonged to the only other person on earth who knew the truth. I wore a hooded sweatshirt and kept my head down as I walked through the dark city streets. St. Jude's Park was deserted at midnight, the street lamps casting long, eerie shadows through the mist. I saw him sitting on the bench, his collar turned up against the damp chill. Arthur Sterling. He looked tired. The lines on his face were deeper, and he leaned heavily on his cane. I sat down next to him, leaving a foot of space between us. "You look terrible, Willow," he said softly, not looking at me. "I feel terrible," I admitted. "They froze my accounts. I lost my job. I think someone is following me." "They are," Arthur said. "Elena has a private investigator on you, a man named Rook. He is nasty, but he is lazy. He is probably sleeping in his car 2 blocks away. I can't do this. Arthur, I whispered, fighting back tears. I can't fight them. They have everything. Money, power, the press. I am nothing. Arthur turned to me. He reached into his coat pocket. You are not nothing. You are Beatrice Kestrel's granddaughter, and you are forgetting who she was. You saw the grandmother who baked cookies and painted roses. You forgot the woman who ran a steel empire for 30 years before she retired. He took my hand and pressed something cold and hard into my palm. What is this? I asked, opening my hand. It was a key. It was old, made of heavy brass, tarnished with age. The bow of the key was intricate, shaped like a bird of prey in mid-dive. A kestrel. She gave this to me 5 years ago, Arthur said. She told me that if the day came when you were cornered, when you felt like there was no way out, I was to give this to you. I ran my thumb over the jagged teeth of the key. What does it open? Safe? A bank box? She wouldn't say. Arthur shook his head. She only gave me a message to pass along with it. He looked me in the eyes, his expression intense. She said, This key does not open a room. It opens the truth. Do not look for it in the dark. Look for it in the place where I felt most free. The place where she felt most free? I repeated. Think, Willow, Arthur urged. You knew her better than anyone. Where was she happiest? Where did she go to escape your parents? The business? The noise? My mind raced. The garden? No, that was too open. The library? No, that was where she worked. Then, a memory surfaced. A cold winter day, the smell of turpentine, the dust motes dancing in the light of the high north-facing windows. The studio, I whispered. The sculpting studio in the winter garden. Arthur nodded slowly. The old workshop. She spent hours there alone. Nobody else went in. Marcus hated the smell. But I have been there, I said. It is just an empty room with old statues. Is it? Arthur asked. Beatrice was a master of perspective. She taught you that things are not always what they appear to be. He stood up, checking his watch. I cannot stay. If they see us together, they will claim collusion and try to get me disbarred. I can guide you, Willow, but I cannot fight this battle for you. You have to find the truth. Arthur, I said, grabbing his sleeve as he turned to leave. Why? Why did she do it this way? Why didn't she just leave the evidence in a safe? Arthur looked down at me, and for a moment, he looked incredibly sad. Because she knew that simply giving you the money wouldn't be enough, he said. She knew that to keep it, to survive them, you had to become strong enough to destroy them. She is not just leaving you an inheritance, Willow. She is teaching you how to fight. He pulled his arm away and vanished into the fog. Leaving me alone on the bench, I clenched the brass key in my fist until it hurt. The cold metal bit into my skin, grounding me. The doubt that had been clouding my mind began to recede, replaced by a spark of something I hadn't felt in weeks. Curiosity, and underneath that, anger. They thought they had broken me. They thought I was cowering in my apartment, waiting for the end. I stood up. I wasn't going back to my apartment. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I had a key. I had a riddle, and I had nothing left to lose. I pulled my hood up and walked out of the park. I was going back to Silver Oak. I was going back into the belly of the beast. And if my parents wanted a war, they were about to find out that the step-grandchild had learned a few things from the Queen after all. The iron gates of Silver Oak Estate groaned as I pushed them open, the sound echoing like a warning through the stillness of the night. I was technically still the legal custodian of the property until the probate court ruled otherwise, a fact that undoubtedly made my mother grind her veneers in her sleep. But as I drove my battered sedan up the winding driveway, the house did not feel like mine. It felt like a beast lying in wait, its dark windows staring down at me with hollow indifference. I parked the car around the back, near the servants' entrance, instinctively trying to make myself small. The house was massive, a sprawling Gothic revival structure that had housed 4 generations of kestrels. But tonight it felt less like a home and more like a tomb. I let myself in, the silence of the hallway hitting me harder than the cold air outside. I did not turn on the main lights. I didn't want to alert the neighbors or the private investigator Arthur had warned me about. I moved through the shadows, guided only by the flashlight on my phone and the heavy brass key clutching in my sweating palm, the place where I felt most free. The riddle looped in my mind. My first thought had been the library, where she devoured books by the dozen. But the library was also where she conducted business, where she signed contracts, where she bore the weight of the Kestrel legacy. That wasn't freedom, that was duty. Then I thought of the rose garden, but the garden was manicured, controlled, a performance for the garden club parties. No, freedom for Beatrice was messy. It was private. It was the one place where she allowed herself to get dirty, to create something that wasn't an asset or a commodity. I turned away from the main staircase and headed toward the winter garden. Beyond the glass-walled conservatory, hidden behind a row of overgrown hedges, stood the old sculpting studio. It was a separate structure, built of rough stone, a relic from the 19th century that my grandfather had wanted to demolish. Beatrice had fought to keep it. She had retreated there when the noise of her life became too loud. I stepped out into the biting wind, my boots crunching on the frost-covered grass. The studio loomed ahead, dark and uninviting. The door was swollen from dampness, and I had to shove it hard with my shoulder to get it to budge. It swung open with a shriek of rusted hinges. The air inside was stale, thick with the smell of clay dust, dried plaster, and the metallic tang of old tools. I swept my flashlight beam across the room. It was exactly as she had left it years ago. Unfinished busts sat on pedestals like severed heads wrapped in plastic. Blocks of marble waited in the corners. The floor was stained with gray slurry. "Okay, Grandma," I whispered, my voice trembling in the dark. "I am here. Where is the truth?" I began to search. I checked the drawers of the heavy workbench. Nothing but chisels, mallets, and rasps. I checked the cabinets, just bags of plaster and bottles of solvent. I ran my hands under the tables, feeling for a hidden latch. Nothing. Panic began to rise in my chest. What if I was wrong? What if Arthur had misunderstood? What if free meant something else entirely? Like the roof where she used to smoke secret cigarettes? Or the old boathouse? I stood in the center of the room, spinning in a slow circle, trying to think like her. The key does not open a room. It opens the truth. My light fell upon the far wall. There, dominating the space, was a massive bronze bust on a black marble plinth. It was a sculpture of my grandfather, Elias Kestrel. I walked toward it. Beatrice had sculpted this herself 30 years ago. It was a masterpiece of technical skill, capturing his sharp nose, his commanding brow, and the thin, cruel line of his mouth. But there was something else. Beatrice had always hated this statue. She used to say it was the only time she captured the devil in bronze. I shone the light on his face. The eyes, they were deep-set, staring accusingly at the door. I moved closer. There was something odd about the angle of the head. It was tilted slightly to the left, in a way that Elias never held himself. He was a rigid man. I reached out and touched the cold bronze. My fingers traced the line of his jaw, his ear, the back of his neck. My fingertip brushed against something sharp, hidden deep within the texture of the sculpted hair. Right at the base of the skull was a tiny, almost invisible slot. It was shaped not like a standard keyhole, but like the silhouette of a bird in flight. My heart hammered against my ribs. I held up the key. The brass kestrel matched the indentation perfectly. I took a deep breath, steeling my nerves. I inserted the key. It slid in with a satisfying, oily smoothness. I turned it. Click. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a low hum started, vibrating through the floorboards. It sounded like heavy machinery waking up from a long sleep. The black marble plinth did not move. Instead, the entire section of the stone wall behind the statue shuddered. Dust rained down from the ceiling, slowly, agonizingly. A section of the wall about 4 feet wide began to rotate inward on a hidden pivot. I stepped back, coughing in the dust, watching with wide eyes as the secret revealed itself. It wasn't a vault. It wasn't a treasure room filled with gold bars or cash. It was a control center. The space was small, perhaps only 5 square meters, windowless, and lined with acoustic foam. It was freezing cold inside, much colder than the studio, conditioned by a dedicated ventilation system. I stepped into the cramped space. The hum was louder here. Along one wall sat a rack of computer servers, their status lights blinking a rhythmic, hypnotic blue. On the desk sat a bank of 3 high-definition monitors and a keyboard, and on the desk, sitting squarely in the center of a pristine blotter, was a thick cream-colored envelope with my name written on it in Beatrice's unmistakable, sharp handwriting. I sat down in the leather chair. It creaked under my weight. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open the envelope. I pulled out a single sheet of stationery. My dearest Willow, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. And more importantly, it means that your parents have taken off their masks. I prayed that I would be wrong. I prayed that when I died, they would grieve with dignity. But I am a realist, and I know my son. I know the woman he married. They will call you a thief. They will call you a manipulator. They will try to rewrite history to make themselves the victims. I could not protect you with words. Willow, words are wind to people like Marcus and Elena. They only respect leverage. So, I built you an arsenal for the last 5 years. I have not been the helpless old woman they thought I was. I have been watching, and I have been recording. The password is the date I first taught you how to draw a perfect circle. Do not hesitate. Burn them down. Love, Grandma. Tears blurred my vision. I wiped them away furiously. I knew the date. It was August 12th, 2005. I typed the numbers into the login screen. August 12th, 2005. The screens flickered to life. I gasped. The monitors were displaying a grid of live video feeds. High-resolution, wide-angle views of every major room in Silver Oak Estate. I saw the Great Hall, bathed in moonlight. I saw the kitchen. I saw the dining room where we had shared so many tense holidays. I saw the library where the will had been read. But then I noticed the file directory on the left screen. It was a massive archive, organized by year, then by month, then by day. Archive, 2023 archive, 2024 archive, 2025. I clicked on a random file from 6 months ago. The video player opened. The timestamp showed 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The location was the master sitting room. The audio was crystal clear. It picked up the sound of ice clinking in a glass. My mother, Elena, walked into the frame. She was on the phone. I don't care if the old hag is sick, Elena was saying, her voice sharp and annoyed. She needs to sign the power of attorney. Marcus, if she dies before she signs it, the taxes will kill us. Just tell her it is for her medical insurance or something. She is too out of it to notice. I clicked another file. This one was my father, Marcus, in the library. He was rifling through the drawers of Beatrice's desk. Where is it? He muttered to himself. Where is the damn ledger? I sat back in the chair, the blue light of the monitors washing over my face. I felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. Beatrice hadn't just installed a security system. She had wired the entire house. She had turned Silver Oak into a panopticon. Every conversation, every cruelty, every plot my parents had hatched within these walls, thinking they were safe. It was all here. They thought she was senile. They thought she was staring out the window at the birds, lost in dementia. But she wasn't looking at the birds. She was listening. She was cataloging. She was enduring their abuse, their condescension, and their theft, day after day, year after year, just so she could capture it on a hard drive. She had turned herself into bait. I looked at the server rack again. There were hundreds of terabytes of data here. It wasn't just evidence of their greed. It was an autopsy of their souls. I sat in the silence of the secret room, the hum of the servers surrounding me like a protective force field. I looked at the kestrel key lying on the desk. Arthur was right. This wasn't just an inheritance. It was a weapon. My fear began to evaporate, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the scared granddaughter hiding in an apartment. I was the operator of the panopticon. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a portable hard drive I had brought with me. I plugged it into the USB port. "Copy all," I whispered. The progress bar appeared on the screen. 1%, 2%. I watched the green bar crawl forward. Every percentage point was a nail in their coffin. Every megabyte was a retort to their lies. Let them sue. Let them drag my name through the mud. Let them pay their crisis management team millions of dollars. They were fighting a war with lawyers and press releases. I was about to fight a war with the truth. I looked up at the bust of my grandfather. His bronze eyes still stared at the door. But now, he didn't look accusing. He looked like he was guarding the gate. "Thank you, Grandma," I said to the glowing screens. The copy finished. I ejected the drive and slipped it into my internal jacket pocket. Right next to my heart, I reversed the mechanism. The wall groaned and rotated back into place. The bust of Elias Kestrel returned to its silent vigil. I locked the hidden slot with the bird-shaped key. I walked out of the studio and into the night air. The wind was still howling, but I didn't feel the cold anymore. I felt lighter. I felt dangerous. I walked back to my car, casting one last look at the dark, imposing silhouette of silver oak. It wasn't a monster anymore. It was my witness. And as I drove away, leaving the estate behind in the rearview mirror, I knew exactly what I had to do next. I wasn't going to release the videos yet. No, that would be too easy. I was going to let them think they were winning. I was going to let them climb higher and higher on their pedestal of lies. I would let them stand in front of a judge and swear on a Bible. And then, when they had nowhere left to run, I would pull the floor out from under them. The drive back to the city felt short. The darkness on the road didn't scare me. I had the light in my pocket. I sat alone in my cramped apartment, the glow of the laptop screen painting my face in spectral shades of blue and white. The external hard drive, the digital heart of silver oak that I had smuggled out under the cover of darkness, hummed softly on the table. It was a small sound, but in the silence of 3 o'clock in the morning, it sounded like a chainsaw. I had a pot of black coffee next to me and a box of tissues that I knew would not be enough. I had organized the files chronologically. I wanted to see the progression. I wanted to understand how a family rots. I clicked on a file dated 3 years ago. May 12th. The video player opened. The camera angle was high, hidden somewhere in the crown molding of the sunroom. The afternoon light was streaming in, illuminating my grandmother in her wheelchair. She looked younger then, less frail, her hands busy with a piece of embroidery. The door flew open. Elena and Marcus marched in. They were not smiling. They did not carry gifts or flowers. They carried a thick stack of legal documents. "We are not leaving until you sign this, Mother," Elena said. Her voice was unrecognizable. It lacked the melodic, cultured lilt she used in public. It was flat, hard, and impatient. "I told you," Beatrice said, not looking up from her needlepoint. "I am not selling the vineyard. Your grandfather planted those vines. They are part of this estate." "The vines are dead wood," Marcus shouted. He paced around her chair like a caged tiger. "The developer is offering $2 million for the land. Mother, $2 million. Do you have any idea what we could do with that? We have an opportunity to invest in that tech startup in Palo Alto." "I read the prospectus," Beatrice said calmly. "It is a pyramid scheme. Marcus, you will lose every cent." "You stupid old woman," Elena snapped. She stepped forward and slapped the embroidery hoop out of my grandmother's hands. It clattered onto the floor. "What do you know about business? You have sat in this house for 30 years rotting away while we try to build something. Sign the papers." "No," Beatrice said. She leaned down slowly to pick up her work. "You are useless," Marcus spat. He kicked the embroidery hoop across the room before she could reach it. Just a useless, stubborn old weight around our necks. I paused the video. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely control the mouse. I had to close my eyes and breathe. I had known they were greedy. I had known they were unkind. But seeing the physical aggression, the sheer hatred in their body language, was like taking a punch to the gut. They treated the woman who gave them everything like she was garbage. I forced myself to click the next file. October 4th, 2 years ago, the setting was the hallway near the front entrance. My grandmother was napping in the adjacent parlor. I could see her feet resting on the ottoman through the open archway. Marcus stood by the coat rack where Beatrice's purse hung. He looked over his shoulder, checking the parlor door, then unzipped her bag. His movements were practiced and fluid. He pulled out her wallet, removed 2 credit cards, and slipped them into his jacket pocket. Elena walked into the frame a moment later, adjusting her diamond earrings in the hall mirror. "Did you get them?" she whispered. "American Express and the visa," Marcus replied, smirking. "I need to cover that charge at the club before the statement comes in." "She will notice," Elena said, though she didn't look worried. Marcus laughed. It was a cold, dismissive sound. "She won't notice a thing. I will just tell her she misplaced them again. She's losing her marbles. Elena, half the time she doesn't know what day it is. If she complains, I will just tell the bank she is senile and canceled them by mistake." "True," Elena said, examining her reflection. "God, it must be terrible to be that pathetic." They walked out the front door, arm in arm, looking for all the world like the perfect couple going out for a lovely dinner. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat. I remembered that month, Beatrice had called me, distressed, saying she couldn't find her cards and couldn't order the special paint I needed for my final project. I had assumed she really had lost them. I had even gently suggested she be more careful. I had helped them gaslight her. The guilt washed over me. Hot and shameful. But the next series of videos broke something inside me that I did not think could be fixed. These were the recordings of their conversations with her when I wasn't there. For years, I had felt a growing distance between my grandmother and me. She seemed to withdraw. She stopped calling as often. When I visited, she seemed sad, almost apologetic. I opened a file labeled July 17th. Beatrice was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the phone. The cord had been cut. I could see the severed end dangling from the wall jack. Elena was chopping vegetables with a large knife, the rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack echoing in the silence. "Why doesn't she call?" Beatrice whispered. "It is my birthday." Elena didn't stop chopping. "Oh, Mother, we told you. Willow is busy. She has her new life in the city. She doesn't have time for you." "She always calls," Beatrice said. "She promised." Elena put the knife down and turned around. She leaned across the table, her face twisting into a mask of faux sympathy. "Look, I didn't want to tell you this, but Willow called us yesterday. She asked if we could make sure you didn't bother her today. She said she was embarrassed by you. She said your hands shake and you smell like old medicine." "She said that?" Beatrice's voice broke. "She hates coming here," Marcus added, walking into the room and pouring himself a drink. "She only comes for the money. Mother, you know that. We are the only ones who actually care about you. We are the only ones who stay." "That is not true," Beatrice wept, putting her face in her hands. "My Willow wouldn't say that." "Accept it," Marcus shouted, slamming his glass down. "She is an ungrateful little brat who is waiting for you to die so she can cash out. Stop whining about her." I let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. I slammed my fist onto the table, making the coffee cup jump. "Liars," I yelled at the screen. "You evil, twisting liars." They had isolated her not just physically, but emotionally. They had painted me as a villain in her eyes to break her spirit. They wanted her to feel unloved, abandoned, so she would turn to them. And all those times I had been frustrated that she didn't seem happy to see me. She had been sitting there thinking I despised her. I had to walk away from the computer. I paced the length of my small apartment, hyperventilating. I wanted to drive to their house and burn it down. I wanted to scream the truth from the rooftops, but I had to keep watching. I had to see it all. I sat back down and opened the file marked August 15th. This was the smoking gun. This was the nuclear option. The camera was hidden in the dining room chandelier. The table was set for dinner. Roast chicken, wine. Beatrice sat at the head of the table. She looked exhausted. "I am not hungry," she said. "You have to eat." "Mother," Elena said soothingly, "I made your favorite herbal tea. It will help with the pain." I watched, holding my breath, as Elena stood at the sideboard. Her back was to Beatrice, but she was facing the mirror on the wall, and the camera caught the reflection perfectly. Elena took a small vial from her pocket. She uncapped it and poured a generous amount of white powder into the teacup. She stirred it vigorously, then added honey. She walked over to Beatrice and placed the cup in front of her. "Drink up," Elena said. "It is good for you." Beatrice took a sip. She grimaced. "It tastes bitter." "It is a new blend," Marcus said, watching her closely. "Drink it all. Doctor's orders." Beatrice drank the tea. 20 minutes later, she slumped forward in her chair. Her breathing was shallow. "Is she out?" Marcus asked. Elena waved a hand in front of Beatrice's face. She slapped her cheek, lightly at first, then harder. Beatrice did not react. "She is out cold," Elena said. "Let's go. The safe is in the study behind the portrait. We have maybe 2 hours before this wears off." "Are you sure this dose won't kill her?" Marcus asked. Standing up, "Who cares?" Elena shrugged. "If she dies, it is natural causes. She is 87. Come on." They left her there. They left my grandmother unconscious, drugged like an animal, slumped over her dinner plate, while they went to rob her safe. I watched the screen for another 10 minutes. The room was silent, except for the ticking of the clock. Then, something happened that made my blood run cold. Beatrice moved. She lifted her head slowly. Her eyes were groggy, fighting the drug. She looked around the empty room. She knew, in that moment, I saw the realization wash over her face. She knew they had drugged her. She turned her head slowly, painfully, until she was looking directly at the chandelier, directly at the camera. She didn't speak clearly. Her words were slurred, thick with sedation, but the audio picked them up. "I know you will see this, Willow," she whispered, her eyes locking with mine across time and space. "Do not cry. Be strong. The Queen never yields." Then her head dropped back onto her chest, and she passed out completely. I wept. I buried my face in my hands and let the tears flow until my chest ached. She had endured this hell for me. She had let them poison her, insult her, and rob her, just to gather the evidence I needed to save myself. She had played the long game, even as her own body was failing her. I wiped my face. I looked at the screen. There was one more folder I needed to check. It was labeled Motive. It was a video from the garage, taken just 2 weeks before she died. Marcus was pacing back and forth, talking on a burner phone. He was sweating, his face pale and frantic. "I need more time," he was pleading. "I told you, the old woman is on her last legs. She will drop any day now." He listened to the voice on the other end, and his face crumbled in terror. "No, no, please. You can't send them to the house. My wife is here. Look, I owe you 4 million. I know. But the estate is worth 20. Once probate clears, I will pay you double. Just don't hurt me. Please." He hung up the phone and leaned against the Mercedes, sliding down to the floor, sobbing. "I am dead," he muttered to himself. "If she doesn't die, I am dead." I sat back. The puzzle was complete. It wasn't just greed. It was desperation. Marcus had gambled away everything he had and everything he didn't have. He was in debt to loan sharks for millions. He needed Beatrice to die, and he needed that inheritance immediately, or he was a dead man walking. That was why they were fighting so hard. That was why they were so vicious. They were cornered rats. I looked at the hard drive. This wasn't just a lawsuit anymore. This was criminal. This was conspiracy, grand larceny, elder abuse, and attempted murder. I spent the next 3 hours copying the files. I made 4 copies. I encrypted one and uploaded it to a cloud server with a dead man's switch. I put another on a thumb drive and taped it inside the vent in my bathroom. I put the third in a hollowed-out book. I was not taking any chances. Just as the sun began to rise, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and orange, my phone buzzed. I picked it up. It was a text message from a number I didn't recognize, but the signature block made it clear. It was from Vance, Elena's shark of a lawyer. Ms. Kestrel, this is a courtesy notification. The final mediation session is scheduled for next Tuesday at 9 in the morning. Your parents are generous people. They are willing to offer you a settlement. If you agree to a 55 split of the estate and sign a non-disclosure agreement, they will drop the suit. However, if you refuse, we are prepared to release medical records indicating that you suffer from hereditary paranoid schizophrenia, a condition that runs in your father's line. We have testimony from 3 psychiatrists ready to go to the press. We will prove you are mentally unfit to manage the estate and have you institutionalized for your own safety. Think carefully. You have 24 hours to respond. I stared at the screen. They were going to try to lock me up. They were going to gaslight the entire world into thinking I was crazy, just like they had tried to do to Beatrice. It was a terrifying threat. A week ago, it might have worked. A week ago, I might have crumbled. But they didn't know what I had seen tonight. They didn't know that I had watched them poison a helpless woman. They didn't know I had watched my father beg for his life to a mobster. I typed a reply. My fingers were steady. Mr. Vance, tell my parents I will see them at mediation, and tell them to wear their best clothes. It is going to be a memorable day. I hit send. I stood up and walked to the window. The city was waking up below me. People were going to work, oblivious to the war that was about to explode. I wasn't afraid anymore. The sadness was still there, a heavy stone in my heart for the grandmother I had lost. But the fear was gone. It had been burned away by a cold, white-hot rage. They wanted to prove I was crazy? Fine. I would show them exactly how crazy a Kestrel could be when she was protecting her own. I went to the shower to wash off the night, as the water hit my face. I didn't feel clean. I felt anointed. I was ready for the final act. If irony were a physical substance, the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton that evening would have been submerged under 10 feet of it. My mother, a woman who had drugged her own mother to rob a safe, had organized a charity gala titled the Beatrice Kestrel Foundation for the Protection of the Elderly. The ticket price was $2,000 a plate. The dress code was black tie. The level of hypocrisy was stratospheric. I stood across the street, watching the limousines deposit the city's elite onto the red carpet. They preened for the cameras, flashing teeth capped with porcelain and necks draped in conflict diamonds, all while pretending to care deeply about the plight of vulnerable seniors. It was a grotesque pantomime. My mother had invited every major media outlet in the state. She intended to use this event as the final nail in my coffin before the mediation next week. She wanted to show the world that she was the grieving, philanthropic daughter, and I was the unstable, predatory granddaughter who had been exiled. I checked my reflection in the side mirror of a parked car. I was not wearing a ball gown. I was wearing a sleek, severe black dress that covered me from neck to wrist, tailored to look like armor. My hair was pulled back tight. I wore no jewelry except for a simple silver watch. I did not look like a guest. I looked like an omen. I walked past the valet stand and approached the velvet rope. The security guard, a burly man with an earpiece, looked down at his clipboard. "Name?" he grunted. "Willow Kestrel," I said loud enough for the reporter standing nearby to hear. The guard frowned, scanning the list. "I don't see you on the list, ma'am." "Check us." "Check under the reason you are all here," I said, stepping past him before he could physically block me. "Or just ask the hostess. I'm sure my mother would love to see me." The reporter's eyes went wide. He signaled to his cameraman, and suddenly, a lens was pointed in my face. The flashbulbs started popping. I didn't shield my eyes. I walked straight down the red carpet, the sea of photographers parting for me not out of respect, but out of the sheer shock of my audacity. I could hear the whispers starting instantly, a low hiss of gossip that traveled faster than light. Inside, the ballroom smelled of lilies and expensive gin. A string quartet was butchering Vivaldi in the corner. Tables were set with crystal and silver, centered around massive floral arrangements that probably cost more than my grandmother's annual medical bills. At the front of the room, on a raised stage, stood Elena. She looked magnificent in a tragic sort of way. She wore a midnight blue velvet gown that made her skin look porcelain pale. She was holding a microphone, her other hand resting theatrically on a blow-up portrait of Beatrice. "My mother was a saint," Elena was saying, her voice breaking perfectly on cue. She was a woman of dignity, and in her final days, to see her manipulated, to see her confused and isolated by those who sought to take advantage of her frailty, it broke my heart. That is why we are here tonight, to ensure no other family has to suffer the betrayal we have endured. The crowd murmured sympathetically. Someone dabbed a handkerchief to their eye. It was a masterclass in manipulation. I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter's tray and downed it in one swallow. Then I started walking down the center aisle. The room grew quiet. It started at the back, a wave of silence that rolled forward as people noticed me. Heads turned, forks stopped halfway to mouths. The string quartet trailed off into a discordant squeak. Elena froze mid-sentence. Her eyes locked onto me, widening in genuine horror. Next to her, Marcus, who had been nodding solemnly at her speech, turned pale. I didn't stop until I was 5 feet from the stage. The silence was absolute. You could hear the ice melting in the buckets. "Beautiful speech, Mother," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the cavernous silence, it carried to the back of the room. I especially liked the part about dignity. It really resonated. Elena griped the microphone so hard her knuckles turned white. "Willow," she hissed, forgetting the audience for a second. "What are you doing here? You were not invited." "I wanted to donate," I said, smiling a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I heard you are raising money to stop people from abusing the elderly. I think that is a cause we can all get behind, especially given what happened at Silver Oak." Elena recovered quickly. She was a professional socialite. After all, she put on a sad, pitying smile and spoke into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please forgive the interruption. My daughter is not well. The grief has affected her mind. Security, could you please escort her out gently? She needs help. Not a scene." 2 large men in suits started moving toward me from the wings. "I am leaving," I said, holding up a hand. "But first, I just wanted to say hello to Dad." I stepped up to the edge of the stage where Marcus was standing. He looked like he was about to vomit. He was sweating profusely, his tuxedo shirt clinging to his chest. He was terrified of me, and more importantly, he was terrified of the scene I might cause. I leaned in close. To the audience, it looked like a daughter whispering a plea to her father. It looked intimate. "Hello, Daddy," I whispered. "Get out," Marcus muttered, his lips barely moving. "Get out before I have you arrested." "I saw the video from the garage. Dad," I whispered, my voice dropping to a lethal chill. "I know about the $4 million you owe to the guys in Las Vegas, and I know they gave you a deadline." Marcus flinched as if I had burned him with a cigarette. His eyes bulged. "And Mom?" I looked past him to Elena, who was stepping forward to intervene. I kept my voice low, just for them. "I saw the tea party on August 15th, the white powder, the honey. I saw you pour it. Elena, I saw you force it down her throat." The effect was instantaneous. Marcus's hand spasmed. The crystal wine glass he was holding slipped from his fingers. It hit the hardwood floor of the stage with a sound like a gunshot. Crash! Red wine splattered across the hem of Elena's blue velvet dress like a spray of arterial blood. The crowd gasped. Marcus didn't move. He stared at me. his mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. He looked like he was having a heart attack. The color had drained from his face so completely that he looked like a corpse. Elena stood frozen, the wine seeping into her expensive gown. Her eyes were darting back and forth between me and Marcus. She saw the terror in his eyes, and she knew. She knew that I wasn't bluffing. She knew that I had seen the unseeable. "Oops," I said, stepping back. "Butterfingers, you should really be more careful with things that are fragile." "Dad, like your reputation," I turned to the crowd. "Enjoy the dinner. Everyone, the roast chicken is to die for. Just make sure you check your tea before you drink it." I turned on my heel and walked out. I didn't run. I walked with the slow, deliberate stride of an executioner leaving the gallows. Behind me, the room erupted into chaos. I heard Elena shouting at the band to play. I heard the murmur of 300 rich people asking each other what the hell had just happened. I heard the frantic click of camera shutters. I walked out into the cool night air, my heart pounding a rhythm of pure adrenaline. I had done it. I had planted the bomb. I had looked them in the eye and told them that I knew where the bodies were buried. But my parents were not the type to roll over and die. They were cornered rats, and cornered rats bite. I was back in my apartment, watching the late-night news. When the counterattack came, it was 11 o'clock. The lead story was, of course, the scene at the gala. They showed footage of me walking down the aisle, looking like a grim reaper in black. But then, the anchor cut to a breaking news interview. "We go live now to the Kestrel estate, where Elena Kestrel has agreed to speak exclusively to Channel 8 about the disturbing incident tonight." The camera showed Elena sitting in her living room. She had changed out of the wine-stained dress into a modest gray cardigan. Her eyes were red and puffy. She held a tissue in one hand and was clutching Marcus's hand with the other. Marcus looked sedated. He was staring at the floor, catatonic. "Mrs. Kestrel," the reporter asked gently, "can you tell us what happened tonight? Your daughter seemed very aggressive." Elena took a shaky breath. A single tear rolled down her cheek. It was an Oscar-worthy performance. "I have tried so hard to protect her," Elena sobbed. "We never wanted this to be public, but tonight, I fear for my life." "Why do you say that?" the reporter pressed. "Willow has always been troubled," Elena said, looking directly into the camera. "When she was 12 years old, we didn't tell anyone, but she attacked me. In the kitchen, she had a carving knife. She was screaming that she wanted to see what color my insides were." My jaw dropped. I stared at the TV, paralyzed. It was a lie so monstrous, so specific, and so horrific that it took my breath away. I had never touched a weapon in my life. At 12, I was drawing horses and crying over boys. "We got her help," Elena continued, weeping openly now. "We sent her to therapy. We thought she was better. But ever since Mother died, the greed has triggered her episodes again. Tonight, when she came up to the stage, she whispered to my husband that she wished we were dead. She said she was going to finish what she started with the knife." The reporter looked horrified. "She threatened to kill you?" "Yes," Elena whispered. "She is dangerous. She is off her medication. Please, if anyone sees her, do not approach her. She needs to be in a hospital, not on the streets." The segment ended with the reporter shaking her head grimly. "A chilling revelation from a heartbroken mother. Authorities have been notified." I sat in the dark, the light of the TV flickering on the walls. My phone started vibrating. It wasn't texts this time. It was notifications from social media. "Psycho. You need to be locked up. How could you try to stab your own mother? Monster." The internet had already convicted me. Elena had played her ace. She had turned the victimhood up to 11. She had painted a picture of a mentally unstable, violent predator who was terrorizing her grieving parents. I watched the comments roll in. Hundreds of them, filled with hatred. The world hated me. The city hated me. If I stepped outside tomorrow, I would probably be spat on. But strangely, I didn't feel the panic I had felt 2 weeks ago. I didn't feel the crushing weight of their judgment. I looked at the external hard drive sitting on my desk. I looked at the little blue light blinking rhythmically. They had just gone on national television and lied. They had accused me of a violent felony. They had fabricated a medical history I didn't have. They thought this was their victory lap. They thought they had buried me under a mountain of shame so heavy I would never crawl out. I walked over to the laptop and closed the lid. "Keep talking, Mother," I whispered to the dark room. "Cry your tears. Make up your stories. Because every lie you tell tonight is just another bar in the cell I am building for you." I wasn't going to respond to the comments. I wasn't going to issue a statement. I was going to wait for Tuesday. The date was set. The invitation had been accepted. And I was going to bring a lot more than a knife to the gunfight. I was bringing the truth, in 4K resolution. I went to bed, and for the first time since my grandmother died, I slept soundly. I slept the sleep of the righteous, because I knew something they didn't. I knew exactly how this story ended, and it wasn't with me in a psychiatric ward. It was with them in handcuffs. The war room was not located in a glass-walled skyscraper with a view of the city. It was located in the basement of Arthur Sterling's law firm, a room with concrete walls, no windows, and a heavy steel door that locked from the inside. For the last 72 hours, this bunker had been my home. The air smelled of stale coffee and ozone from the overheating servers. Arthur and I were not just preparing a legal defense. We were building a guillotine. We had brought in a specialist. His name was Leo, a digital forensics expert who looked more like a college student than a man who had consulted for the FBI. He wore a hoodie and tapped on his mechanical keyboard with a speed that was dizzying. His job was crucial. We knew the videos were real. But in a court of law, truth does not matter as much as provenance. Elena's lawyers would claim deepfakes. They would claim AI manipulation. Leo was here to make sure those arguments died before they could take their first breath. "The metadata is pristine," Leo said, spinning his chair around to face us. He took a sip of energy drink. "I have verified the hash values for every single file against the server logs. The timestamps match the lighting conditions in the room based on historical weather data. I can trace the pixel degradation to the specific lens model of the hidden cameras. If they try to say this is fake, I will laugh them out of court." "Good," Arthur said, rubbing his temples. "But we need more than just the videos of abuse. We need a financial smoking gun, something that proves premeditation." "I found something better," Leo said. "I was cross-referencing the video timestamps with the document scans you brought from the house. Look at this." He pulled up a video on the main screen. It was dated February 3rd, 2 years ago. The location was the study. In the video, my mother, Elena, was sitting at Beatrice's desk. She had a light box, a device used by artists to trace drawings, and she was carefully practicing a signature on a scrap of paper. Next to her was a document titled Life Insurance Policy Modification. "Zoom in," I said. Leo enlarged the image. Elena was not signing her own name. She was signing Beatrice Kestrel. "Now, look at the document itself," Leo said, bringing up a scanned PDF next to the video. "This is a policy adjustment that increased the payout upon death from $1 million to $5 million. The beneficiary was changed from the Kestrel Family Trust to Elena and Marcus Kestrel, joint survivors." "That is forgery," Arthur said, his voice low and dangerous. "And it is insurance fraud. That is a federal crime." "She practiced the signature for 40 minutes, Leo noted, pointing at the screen, "and then she signed the official document. I can overlay the signature from the video with the one on the document. It is a perfect match. She literally signed a confession." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. They didn't just want the estate, I realized. They were betting on her death. They increased the payout because they knew she wasn't going to last much longer, because they were poisoning her. "We have them," Arthur said, closing his eyes briefly. "This puts them in prison for 20 years, minimum." "Not yet," I said, staring at my mother's face on the screen. "We need to make sure the jury sees the human cost. We have the numbers. We need the voice," as if on cue. My burner phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I picked it up. Hello? Miss Willow? The voice was hesitant, older, and trembling. Is that you? I recognized the voice immediately. It brought back a flood of memories, the smell of fresh bread, the sound of humming in the kitchen. Sarah? I asked. Sarah, is that you? Sarah Miller had been the housekeeper at Silver Oak for 15 years. She was the one who bandaged my scraped knees when my parents were too busy. 6 months ago, she had been abruptly fired. Elena had told me Sarah was caught stealing silverware. I hadn't believed it, but I had been too disconnected to investigate. I saw the news. Miss Willow, Sarah said. Her voice was thick with emotion. I saw what that woman said about you, that you had a knife, that you were crazy. It is a lie, Sarah, I said gently. I know it is a lie, Sarah cried out. I raised you, child. You wouldn't hurt a fly. I cannot sit here and watch her destroy you. I cannot do it anymore. Sarah, why did she fire you? I asked, putting the phone on speaker so Arthur could hear. She didn't fire me for stealing, Sarah whispered. She fired me because I walked in on her. It was in the morning. Your grandmother was crying. Mrs. Elena was screaming at her. She told your grandmother that if she didn't stop asking for you, she would put her in a home where nobody would ever find her. She called her a waste of space. I tried to step in. I told her to stop. Mrs. Elena looked at me like I was dirt. She told me if I didn't leave that day, she would call the police and say I stole the silver. She threatened my pension. Miss Willow, I was scared. Arthur leaned forward. Mrs. Miller, this is Arthur Sterling. Would you be willing to testify to that under oath? There was a long silence on the other end. I held my breath. I am scared of them. Mr. Sterling, Sarah admitted. They have so much power. They have nothing, I said, my voice firm. Sarah, I promise you, they are about to lose everything, but I need your help to finish it. For Mrs. Beatrice, Sarah said softly. I will do it. For Mrs. Beatrice. We arranged to pick her up and bring her to a safe hotel the night before the mediation. We were assembling an army, but the enemy camp was beginning to fracture. Later that night, around 2 o'clock in the morning, my phone rang again. This time, the caller ID made my stomach turn. Dad. I stared at the screen. I debated not answering. But curiosity, dark and sharp, took over. I hit the record button on the external audio device we had set up and answered. What do you want? Marcus? I didn't call him Dad. He had lost that right. Willow, he whispered. He sounded drunk, or exhausted, or both. Willow, listen to me. Don't hang up. Please. You have 2 minutes, I said coldly. You have to understand. He stammered. It is her. It is all Elena. She is the one who pushed for the lawsuit. She is the one who hired the PR firm. I just wanted what was fair. Fair? I asked. Was it fair when you stole Grandma's credit cards? Was it fair when you told her I hated her? I was desperate, Marcus cried. Willow, honey, listen. I know you know about the Vegas debt. They are going to kill me. Literally kill me. I need cash. Look, we can make a deal. I signaled to Arthur. He shook his head in disgust. What kind of deal? I asked. I will flip, Marcus said. The desperation in his voice was pathetic. I will retract my statement about the knife. I will tell the judge Elena made it up. I will tell them she forged the will. She pressured your grandmother. I will give you everything on her. I just need $500,000. Just enough to clear the sharks. Then I disappear. You get the estate. You get your revenge on Elena, and I go away. Everyone wins. I felt a bile rise in my throat. He was selling out his wife, his partner in crime, for pocket change. He had no loyalty, no spine, no honor. You are recording this, aren't you? I asked. What? No, I am, I said. And I want you to know something. Marcus, I wouldn't give you $500,000 if you were on fire. You are going to go down with her. You deserve each other. Willow, please. They will break my legs. Then you better learn to walk on your hands, I said. See you in court. I hung up. That was useful, Arthur said dryly. Attempted extortion? Witness tampering? Add it to the pile. He is terrified, I said, looking at the phone. Which means they know they are losing control. Elena must be panicking. I was right. Elena was panicking, and when Elena panicked, she got dangerous. I decided to go back to my apartment that evening to grab a change of clothes. Arthur advised against it, but I needed to feel like I still had a life outside of the bunker. I drove carefully, checking my rearview mirror constantly. I didn't see the private investigator. Rook, maybe he had given up. I walked up the 3 flights of stairs to my apartment. I reached for my keys, but then I stopped. The door frame was splintered. The wood around the lock was chewed up, as if someone had taken a crowbar to it. The door was slightly ajar. I didn't go in. I wasn't stupid. I backed away slowly, down the hall, and called the police. When the officers arrived and cleared the apartment, they let me in. It was a disaster zone. My furniture was slashed. My mattress was overturned and gutted. The stuffing pulled out in great white handfuls. My bookshelf had been pulled down. My laptop, an old decoy I had left behind, was smashed to pieces on the floor. The walls were spray-painted with the word bitch in red. Robbery? The officer asked, taking notes. They didn't take the TV. No, I said, stepping over a pile of broken dishes. They weren't looking for electronics. They were looking for a hard drive. I walked into the bathroom. The vent cover where I had hidden the second decoy drive was unscrewed. The drive was gone. I smiled grimly. Elena had sent someone to sanitize the scene. She thought she had found the evidence. She thought she had won. If she checked that drive, she would find nothing but 300 hours of public domain cat videos and a single text file titled, "Try Harder. Mom." But the violence of the act shook me. This wasn't just a search. It was a message. It was a violation. If I had been home— "Do you have any enemies, Ms. Kestrel?" the officer asked. "Just 2, I said, "and I know exactly where they live." I didn't stay there. I went back to the bunker. The rage was now a cold, solid thing in my chest, heavy and unbreakable. They had destroyed my home. They had destroyed my reputation. They had destroyed my family. There was nothing left to talk about. I sat down at the computer. I opened my email client. I typed in the address of Mr. Vance, the high-priced shark representing my parents. Subject: the final mediation body. Mr. Vance. My apartment was broken into tonight. Whoever did it was looking for something specific. Please tell your clients that what they are looking for is not in a bathroom vent. It is in a place they can never reach. We will not be accepting the settlement. We will not be signing the NDA. We will see you at the mediation table on Tuesday morning. Do not be late. And tell Elena to wear waterproof mascara. Willow Kestrel. I hit send. Arthur looked over my shoulder. Short. I like it. It is time to end this, I said. Leo, are the presentation files ready? Rendered and encrypted, Leo said, holding up a sleek silver flash drive. The quality is cinematic. Good, I said. I took the drive and closed my fingers around it. It felt hot, like a live coal. The pieces were on the board. The traps were set. The witnesses were secure. My parents were walking into the slaughterhouse. Convinced they were the butchers, they had no idea that the blade was already falling. Tuesday was going to be a bloodbath, and I couldn't wait to watch the first drop fall. The mediation took place in the neutral territory of the Hartman Finch law firm, a glass and steel monolith in downtown Richmond. The conference room they had assigned to us was on the 42nd floor, a sterile aquarium of a room with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city I was currently at war with. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that felt designed to keep tempers cool, but the atmosphere inside was heavy enough to crush a submarine. I sat on the left side of the long mahogany table, my back straight, my hands folded on the empty surface in front of me. I wore the same black armor-like dress I had worn to the gala. beside me. Arthur Sterling arranged his notepad and a single slim silver laptop with the precision of a surgeon laying out scalpels. Across the table sat the opposition. My mother, Elena, was dressed in a soft, dove-gray suit that screamed understated wealth and maternal suffering. She had a lace handkerchief clutched in her hand, which she dabbed occasionally at dry eyes. Next to her was my father, Marcus. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 3 days. His skin was pasty, glistening with a sheen of cold sweat, and his leg was bouncing under the table with a manic, nervous rhythm that vibrated the water pitcher. He refused to look at me. He stared at the wood grain of the table as if hoping it would open up and swallow him whole. And then there was Vance. Julian Vance was the kind of lawyer who smiled with his mouth, but never with his eyes. He was tan, polished, and radiated an aura of expensive cologne and moral flexibility. He spread his files out on the table, creating a fortress of paper between us. At the head of the table sat Judge Caldwell, a retired circuit court judge acting as the mediator. He was a no-nonsense man with bushy eyebrows and a look of perpetual impatience. "Let us begin," Judge Caldwell said, checking his watch. "We are here to resolve the dispute regarding the estate of Beatrice Kestrel. I have read the briefs. The hostility here is noted. I expect civility today. Mr. Vance, you requested this session. The floor is yours." Vance stood up. Buttoning his jacket, he looked at me, then at the judge, putting on a face of grave concern. "Thank you, Your Honor," Vance began, his voice smooth and baritone. "We are not here today to litigate. We are here to heal. My clients, Mr. and Mrs. Kestrel, have been dragged through a nightmare. They have lost their beloved mother, the matriarch of their family, and in their time of grief, they have been subjected to a campaign of harassment, public humiliation, and cruel manipulation by their own daughter." He paused for effect. Resting a hand on Elena's shoulder, she let out a small, choked sob. "We have evidence," Vance continued, tapping a thick stack of files, "that Beatrice Kestrel was not of sound mind when she altered her will. We have sworn affidavits from Dr. Aris, her primary care physician for the last 6 months, stating that Beatrice showed advanced signs of dementia and cognitive decline. She was easily confused. She was paranoid. She was, to put it bluntly, a puppet waiting for a puppeteer." Arthur stiffened beside me, but I didn't move. I knew Dr. Aris. He was a slimy man who had prescribed my grandmother painkillers she didn't need. I had no doubt Elena had paid off his mortgage in exchange for that signature. "Furthermore," Vance said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "we have grave concerns about the beneficiary herself. Willow Kestrel has a history of mental instability. We have uncovered medical records suggesting a hereditary predisposition to paranoid schizophrenia. The outburst at the charity gala, where she publicly threatened her father, was not an isolated incident. It was a symptom." Elena looked up then, her eyes locking onto the judge. "I just want her to get help, Your Honor," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't care about the money. I really don't. I just want my mother to rest in peace without this circus. And I want my daughter to be in a facility where she can be treated. It breaks my heart to see her like this, so full of hate, so detached from reality." It was a brilliant performance. If I hadn't known she was a monster, I might have believed her myself. She was the grieving mother, the martyr, willing to sacrifice her inheritance to save her sick child. Judge Caldwell looked at me. I offered no reaction. I simply stared at Elena, unblinking. I wanted her to feel the weight of my gaze. I wanted her to look into the eyes of the daughter she was trying to institutionalize and see the abyss looking back. "Mr. Vance," the judge said, "get to the proposal." "Of course," Vance said. He slid a single piece of paper across the table. It stopped right in front of my hands. "This is our final offer," Vance said, his tone shifting from tragic to businesslike. "To avoid a lengthy public trial that would only further damage Willow's fragile mental state. The Kestrel family is willing to be generous," he gestured to the paper, We propose a settlement of $500,000, Vance announced. Paid into a trust, administered by an independent guardian, to be used for Willow's medical care and housing. In exchange, Willow will renounce all claims to the Silver Oak estate, the art collection, and the financial assets. She will issue a public apology retracting her statements at the gala, and she will sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, preventing her from ever discussing the family, the estate, or her grandmother's medical history again. $500,000. It was less than 10% of the estate's value. It was a pittance. But the money wasn't the point. The point was the silence. They wanted to buy my voice. They wanted to bury the truth under a mountain of legal jargon and turn me into a ward of the state. This offer expires when we leave this room, Vance added, checking his Rolex. If you refuse, we proceed with the competency hearing. We will petition the court to have you involuntarily committed for evaluation. And given the public threats you made, we will win. The room fell silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioner and the frantic tapping of Marcus's shoe against the table leg. Judge Caldwell looked at me over his reading glasses. Ms. Kestrel, he said, your counsel has been very quiet. Do you understand the offer on the table? $500,000 is a significant sum. Litigation is a gamble. Do you have a response? I looked at the paper. I looked at the number. 500,000. Then I looked at Marcus. He was sweating so much his collar was soaked. He knew. He remembered the phone call. He knew I had recordings. But he was praying that I was bluffing, or that I had lost them in the break-in. I looked at Elena. She had stopped crying. She was watching me with a predator's intensity, daring me to speak. Take the money, little girl. Her eyes said, take the money and disappear. I slowly reached out and picked up the settlement offer. The paper felt crisp in my hands. $500,000, I said softly. It was the first time I had spoken since entering the room. My voice was calm, devoid of any tremor. It is more than you deserve, Elena snapped, her mask slipping for a fraction of a second. I looked at her. You think this is about money, don't you? You think everything is about money. I tore the paper in half. The sound was sharp and loud in the quiet room. Vance sighed, shaking his head. Your Honor, note the hostility. We tried. I tore the halves again, and again, until the offer was nothing but a pile of confetti on the polished mahogany. I have a counter-proposal, I said, my voice hardening. We are not here to haggle, Vance said dismissively. That was a take-it-or-leave-it offer. I am not haggling, I said. I am dictating terms. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. I placed my hands flat on the table and leaned forward. Here is my offer, I said, looking directly at my parents. You will withdraw your lawsuit immediately. You will resign as executors of any remaining family trusts. You will admit to the fraud regarding the insurance policy, and then you will leave the state of Virginia. You will go somewhere very far away, and you will never, ever say my name again. Vance laughed. It was a dry, incredulous bark. Is this a joke? You are demanding my clients leave their home? Based on what? And if you do that, I continued, ignoring the lawyer, keeping my eyes locked on Elena, I will not send the hard drive to the district attorney. I will not send it to the police. I will let you walk away with your freedom, if not your dignity. Elena's face went rigid. The blood drained from her cheeks. You are threatening us, Vance sputtered, standing up to match my height. This is extortion. Your Honor, she is trying to blackmail my clients in a mediation session. I want this on the record. It is not blackmail, I said calmly. You are demanding they leave the state or you go to the police, Vance shouted, pointing a finger at me. That is the textbook definition of blackmail. You have just dug your own grave. Ms. Kestrel, I will have you arrested before you leave this building. Arthur, I said, not looking away from my mother. Arthur didn't speak. He simply reached into his briefcase and pulled out a remote control. He pointed it at the ceiling. A motorized screen descended silently from the ceiling at the far end of the room. The lights in the conference room dimmed automatically. "What is this?" Judge Caldwell asked, frowning. "Counsel, what are you doing?" "Mr. Vance asked for the record," I said. "I am providing it." Arthur pressed a button on the remote. The projector hummed to life. A beam of blue light cut through the gloom, hitting the white screen. "You accused me of manipulating a senile old woman," I said, my voice ringing clear in the darkened room. "You accused me of isolating her. You accused me of being a liar." The screen flickered. The date stamp appeared in the corner. August 15th, 2025. The location? Silver Oak Dining Room. "No," Marcus whispered. He tried to stand up, but his legs gave out, and he collapsed back into his chair. "No, please." "Watch," I commanded. The video began to play. The quality was crystal clear. The audio was perfect. On the screen, Elena stood by the sideboard, the white powder, the honey, the stirring of the spoon. "Drink it, Mother." The Elena on the screen said, "It will help you sleep. It tastes bitter." Beatrice replied, "In the conference room." The real Elena let out a sound that was not human. It was a high-pitched keen, like a wounded animal. She scrambled to her feet, knocking her chair over. "Turn it off!" she shrieked. "Turn it off right now. It is fake. It is AI. It is not real." "Sit down, Mrs. Kestrel," Judge Caldwell barked, his voice thunderous. He was leaning forward, squinting at the screen, his face a mask of shock. I signaled Arthur again. The video skipped forward. Now, Marcus was on the screen, leaning over the slumped body of his mother. "Die already." The digital Marcus hissed, "Just do us all a favor and die." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum. Vance, the high-priced lawyer, looked at the screen, then at his clients. His mouth hung open. He looked at the paperwork in front of him, the fake medical records, the affidavits, and he realized he had been handed a grenade with the pin pulled out. He slowly closed his folder and pushed it away from him, physically distancing himself from the people sitting next to him. I looked at Elena. She was standing there, shaking, her hands clutching her throat. The grieving daughter act was gone. The victim mask had been incinerated. All that was left was the naked, ugly truth of what she was. "That is video number 142, I said, my voice cutting through the dark. "I have 300 more. I have the forgery of the insurance policy. I have the theft of the credit cards. I have the phone call where Marcus admits to the gambling debt. I have it all." I turned to Vance. "You asked if I was blackmailing you." I said, "No, blackmail is when you want money. I don't want your money. I have $6.8 million of my own." I looked back at the judge, whose face was pale with fury. "I am not threatening them," I said. "I am giving them a chance to run before the cage door slams shut, because once this leaves this room, there is no settlement. There is only prison." "This session is suspended," Judge Caldwell said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. He pointed a trembling finger at Vance. "Counsel, you will remain here. Your clients, God help them." Elena slumped back against the wall, sliding down until she hit the floor. She looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw true fear in her eyes. Not the fear of losing money, the fear of total annihilation. "Turn on the lights. Arthur," I said, "I think the cockroaches have seen enough." The silence in the conference room following the poisoning video was thick enough to choke on. The air conditioning hummed, a mechanical drone that sounded like a countdown. Judge Caldwell was staring at the blank screen where my mother had just been shown drugging his friend. His face a mask of gray shock. But Elena Kestrel was a survivor. She was a cockroach in a designer suit, and she was not dead yet. She scrambled up from where she had slumped, her hands gripping the edge of the mahogany table until her knuckles turned the color of bone. "It is out of context," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "She was in pain. It was a homeopathic remedy. We were trying to help her sleep because she was agitated. You cannot prove what was in that cup. It is just powder. It could have been sugar." Vance, her lawyer, looked at her. The color had drained from his face, but his legal instincts were still twitching. He saw a sliver of doubt, a tiny crack he could pry open. "My client has a point, Your Honor," Vance stammered, though his voice lacked its usual oily confidence. "Without a toxicology report, without physical evidence of the substance, this is just a video of a daughter making tea for her mother. It looks bad. Certainly, but it is circumstantial. It is not proof of malice." I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that cut through their desperate babble. "Malice," I repeated. "You want proof of malice? You want to see the intent?" I looked at Arthur. He didn't need a verbal command. He knew the playlist. We had choreographed this execution down to the second. "File number 142, I said. "Arthur, please." The projector beam flared again, cutting through the dim room like a searchlight. "This is from 7 years ago," I announced, my voice steady. "October 24th, Grandma Beatrice's 80th birthday, a milestone, a celebration." The video appeared on the screen. The quality was breathtaking. Beatrice had upgraded the cameras in the main living room to 4K resolution just a month prior. Every detail was sharp, the dust motes dancing in the light, the pattern on the rug, and the expressions on my parents' faces. There were no balloons, there were no streamers, there were no guests, and there was absolutely no cake. Beatrice sat in her favorite wingback chair. She looked stronger then, her spine straight, her hair perfectly coiffed, but her face was a portrait of devastation. Standing over her were Elena and Marcus. They loomed like vultures. "Are you not dead yet?" The voice on the speakers was Elena's. It was loud, shrill, and dripping with venom. It echoed off the glass walls of the conference room, bouncing back to hit the real Elena in the face. On the screen, the digital Elena threw a stack of papers onto her mother's lap. "Do you plan to hold on to that money until it rots? Do you plan to take it down into the ground with you? Sign the transfer papers. Sign them now." Beatrice looked at the papers, then up at her daughter. "It is my birthday, Elena." "Nobody cares about your birthday," Marcus shouted. On screen, he paced behind the chair, his face twisted in a sneer. "You are a burden, Mother. A useless, expensive burden. If you do not sign those papers, I swear to God, I will have you declared incompetent by the end of the week." "You cannot do that," Beatrice said, her voice shaking but firm. "Watch me," Marcus roared. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. "I will find the cheapest, dirtiest state-run asylum in Virginia. I will dump you there and forget the code to the front door. You will rot in a room that smells of urine and cabbage, and you will die in your own filth. Is that what you want for your legacy?" In the conference room, the real Marcus let out a whimpering sound. He buried his face in his hands, unable to look at the screen. Judge Caldwell looked physically ill. He covered his mouth with his hand, his eyes wide with horror, but the video was not done. On the screen, Beatrice pushed the papers off her lap. They scattered across the floor like dead leaves. "I would rather burn it," Beatrice said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of steel. "I would rather pile every dollar I have in the fireplace and strike a match than give a single cent to vultures like you. You are not my family. You are parasites." She looked directly at Elena. "Willow is the only one. Willow is the only one who treats me like a human being. She is the only one who loves me." That was the trigger. On the screen, Elena's face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. It was the face of a demon. "Willow?" Elena screamed. "That little charity case? That mistake?" And then, it happened. Elena pulled her arm back and swung. Thwack! The sound of the slap was amplified by the high-quality microphone. It was a wet, meaty impact that sounded like a gunshot in the silent conference room. Beatrice's head snapped to the side. Her glasses flew off her face and skittered across the floor. A red handprint bloomed instantly on her pale, wrinkled cheek. In the conference room, the real Elena gasped. She stumbled back, her hand flying to her own mouth as if she had been the one hit. But the digital Elena did not stop. She leaned over her mother, breathing hard, her eyes wild. She began to laugh. It was a manic, terrifying laugh. It started low and rose to a screech. "You think you can threaten me?" the digital Elena hissed, grabbing Beatrice's chin and forcing her to look up. "Who will believe you, old woman? Who? You are a senile, confused geriatric, and I am Elena Kestrel. I am the pillar of the community. I am the loving daughter. If you tell anyone I hit you, they will just say you fell. They will say you are imagining things. You are powerless." The screen went black. The lights in the conference room did not come back on immediately. For 10 seconds, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The violence of the act, the cruelty of the laughter, hung in the air like toxic smoke. Then, the lights flickered on. The devastation was total. Elena was holding on to the edge of the table to keep from collapsing. Her face was the color of ash. Her lipstick stood out like a fresh wound against her pale skin. She looked at the judge, then at me, her eyes pleading, desperate, terrified. The Elena Kestrel she had bragged about, the pillar of the community, the untouchable socialite, had just been executed on that screen. Judge Caldwell slowly stood up. He did not look at the lawyers. He looked directly at Elena. His face was hard, his eyes filled with a disgust so profound it looked like hatred. "In 40 years on the bench," the judge said, his voice low and trembling with suppressed rage, "I have seen murderers, rapists, and thieves, but I have never seen anything as soulless as that." He turned to Vance. "Counsel." The judge spat the word like a curse. "I assume you were unaware of this evidence?" Julian Vance was staring at the blank screen, his mouth agape. He looked like he had been slapped himself. He looked at his client, the woman who had lied to him, the woman who had just committed assault on camera, and he realized his career was flashing before his eyes. If he continued to defend this, he would be disbarred. He would be a pariah. Vance stood up. He grabbed his briefcase. He didn't even bother to close the files scattered on the table. "I am withdrawing," Vance announced, his voice shaking. "I am withdrawing as counsel effective immediately. I was not informed of these facts. I cannot represent these clients." "You can't leave," Elena screeched, grabbing his sleeve. "We paid you. You have to fix this." Vance ripped his arm away as if she were burning him. "Don't touch me," he hissed. "You lied to me. You told me she was the abuser. You told me she was crazy. I am done. Do not call my office." He practically ran out of the room, leaving the door swinging wildly behind him. My parents were alone. No lawyer, no defense, just the judge, Arthur, and me. Marcus was slumped in his chair, sobbing quietly. "It is over," he mumbled. "It is all over." "Not quite," I said. "I wasn't done. I had destroyed their defense. I had destroyed their reputation. Now, I needed to destroy their alliance. I needed to make sure that when the police came, they wouldn't stand back to back fighting the world. I wanted them at each other's throats. "You know," I said conversationally, looking at Elena, "Marcus seems very upset, but do you know why?" Elena looked at me, her eyes darting nervously. "Shut up, Willow. He isn't crying because he feels guilty about Grandma," I said. "He is crying because he knows he is broke, and he tried to sell you out to save himself." "Liar," Elena whispered, but her eyes flicked to Marcus. "Arthur," I said, "play the audio file. The phone call from 2 nights ago." Arthur pressed the button. My voice filled the room first. "What kind of deal?" Then Marcus's voice. "I will flip. I will retract my statement about the knife. I will tell the judge Elena made it up. I will tell them she forged the will. I mean, she pressured your grandmother. I will give you everything on her. I just need $500,000. Elena went rigid. She stopped shaking. She turned her head slowly, mechanically, to look at her husband. The audio continued. "She is the one who pushed for the lawsuit. She is the one who hired the PR firm. You get your revenge on Elena, and I go away. Everyone wins. I stop the recording. The silence this time was different. It wasn't shocked. It was murderous. Marcus looked up. He saw the look on his wife's face, and he flinched. "Elena," he stammered, holding up his hands. "Elena, baby, listen. I was drunk. I was scared. The guys in Vegas threatened to break my legs. I didn't mean it. I was just trying to get some cash so we could run together." "You sold me out," Elena whispered. Her voice was deadly calm. "I did everything for us. I drugged her for us. I forged the papers for us. I hired the people to break into her apartment for us. And you tried to sell me to that bitch for $500,000? "I had to," Marcus yelled, his cowardice turning into aggression. "You are the one who got us into this mess. If you hadn't slapped her—" "If I hadn't slapped her," Elena screamed, lunging at him. She grabbed him by the lapels of his suit and shook him. "You are the one who gambled away our savings. You are the leech. I should have left you 20 years ago." "Get off me!" Marcus shoved her. She stumbled back, hitting the wall. "Order!" Judge Caldwell shouted, banging his fist on the table. "Order in this room!" But they didn't hear him. The facade of the perfect couple, the united front, had shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. They were screaming at each other, hurling insults, dredging up decades of resentment. "You are a loser, Marcus. You are a psychopath. Elena." I watched them. I felt a strange, cold sense of peace settle over me. This was it. This was the end. They weren't powerful anymore. They weren't scary. They were just two greedy, broken people tearing each other apart in a glass room while the city watched from below. I stood up. I picked up the silver flash drive from the table. "I think my work here is done," I said to Arthur. Elena heard me. She stopped screaming at Marcus. She turned to me, her hair wild, her eyes wide with panic. The reality of her situation crashed down on her. The lawyer was gone. The judge was a witness to her crimes. Her husband had betrayed her, and I held the evidence. She lunged toward me, falling to her knees before she reached the table. It was the first time in my life I had ever seen my mother kneel. "Willow," she choked out. Tears streamed down her face, ruining the makeup she had applied so carefully that morning. "Willow, please, don't send that to the police. I am your mother. I gave you life." I looked down at her. I remembered the slap on the screen. I remembered the poison in the tea. I remembered the lies about the knife. "You didn't give me life," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "You gave me birth. Beatrice gave me life. Please," she begged, reaching out a hand to grab the hem of my dress. "I will do anything. I will sign the papers. I will go away. Just don't put me in prison. Please, Willow, have mercy." I stepped back, out of her reach. "Mercy?" I asked. "I don't recall that being in the will." I looked at Judge Caldwell. "Your Honor, I believe you have a duty to report crimes witnessed in your presence." The judge nodded grimly. "The bailiff has already called the authorities. They are in the lobby." Elena let out a wail of despair. She collapsed onto the floor, curling into a ball. Marcus sat in his chair, staring blankly at the wall, muttering to himself about Vegas. I turned to Arthur. "Let's go. I need fresh air." We walked out of the conference room, leaving the chaos behind us. I didn't look back. The image of my mother cowering on the floor and my father broken in his chair was the last memory of them I would ever keep. As we stepped into the elevator, Arthur looked at me. A small, rare smile touched his lips. "Beatrice would have been proud," he said. "Beatrice knew," I replied, clutching the flash drive. "She knew exactly who they were, and she knew exactly who I could become." The elevator doors closed, sealing away the past. The numbers started to tick down. 41, 40, 39. I was going down to the ground floor, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was flying. Judge Caldwell stood up from his leather chair. The movement was slow, heavy with a mixture of exhaustion and cold fury. He looked at the scene before him. My mother crumpled on the floor like a discarded marionette. My father staring catatonically at the wall, and the digital ghost of my grandmother's suffering fading from the projector screen. "This session is terminated," the judge announced. His voice was not loud, but it possessed a finality that made the glass walls of the room vibrate. In my 30 years on the bench, I have presided over divorces that were bloody and corporate litigations that were ruthless, but I have never witnessed such a profound degradation of the human spirit. He looked at me, his expression softening just a fraction. "Ms. Kestrel, as a mediator, my role is to find a middle ground. But there is no middle ground here. There is only the law. I am advising you, officially, to take that hard drive directly to the district attorney's office. This goes beyond civil disputes. This is criminal." Elena heard the word criminal, and it acted like a defibrillator. She scrambled up from the carpet, her movements frantic and disjointed. She crawled toward me, ignoring the judge, ignoring Arthur. She reached out with trembling hands, grabbing the fabric of my skirt. "No," she gasped, her voice ragged. "No, Willow, please, you cannot do that. You cannot send the police. Think about who we are. Think about the family name. If this gets out, if people see that video, I will lose everything. The charity board, the country club, my friends, I will be a pariah. I will lose my honor." I looked down at her. For my entire life, this woman had been a titan. She was the one who critiqued my posture, my clothes, my career, and my very existence. She was the one who made me feel small so she could feel tall. And now, she was on her knees, begging not for forgiveness, but for her social standing. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't joy. It was pity. It was the kind of pity you feel when you see a rabid animal that needs to be put down. The hate that had fueled me for weeks, the burning rage that had kept me awake at night, suddenly evaporated. She wasn't a monster. She was just pathetic. "Honor?" I asked, my voice quiet. "You are worried about your honor?" I pulled my skirt from her grip and took a step back. "Mother, you lost your honor the moment you raised your hand against a woman in a wheelchair," I said. "You lost your dignity when you poisoned her tea. You are not losing anything today that you didn't already throw away years ago. I don't need to destroy your reputation." "You did that all by yourself," Elena sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "Please, Willow, is there no way? Is there nothing I can do?" I looked at Arthur. He nodded once, reaching into his briefcase. He pulled out a document we had drafted at 4 a.m. the night before. It was thick, stapled, and terrifyingly comprehensive. "I have a deal for you," I said. "It is the only deal you are going to get, and it expires in exactly 3 minutes. Elena looked up, hope warring with terror in her tear-streaked face. Marcus turned his head, his eyes focusing for the first time in an hour. I threw the document onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud. "This is a confession," I explained, my tone surgical. "It details everything: the forgery of the insurance policy, the theft of the credit cards, the isolation of Beatrice Kestrel, the fabrication of the story about me attacking you with a knife. It admits that all your statements to the press were lies." I pointed to the signature line at the bottom. "You are going to sign this," I said. "Both of you, and along with this, you are going to sign a waiver renouncing any and all claims to the Kestrel estate. Now and forever, you will walk away with the clothes on your backs and not a penny more." "And if we sign?" Marcus croaked, his voice dry as dust. "If you sign," I said, "I will not release the videos to the 6 o'clock news. I will not post them on the internet. I will not send them to your friends at the club. The public humiliation will be contained to a formal apology issued by your lawyers." "And the police?" Elena asked, her voice trembling. I looked at her. "I will not personally hand this drive to the police today." It was a carefully worded promise, a lawyer's promise. "You have 2 minutes left," I said, checking my watch. "If that pen doesn't touch the paper by the time the second hand hits the 12, I am walking out that door. And the first call I make is to Channel 8. Elena looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at Elena. They shared a look of pure, unadulterated defeat. The dream was over. The millions of dollars they had killed for. The land they had plotted to sell. The life of luxury they felt entitled to. It was all gone. With a shaking hand, Marcus reached for the pen. He signed his name. The scratch of the nib against the paper sounded like a scream in the quiet room. He shoved the paper toward Elena. She hesitated. She looked at the document as if it were a death warrant. In a way, it was. It was the death of Elena Kestrel, the socialite, but the alternative was the death of Elena Kestrel, the free woman. She grabbed the pen and signed. She pressed down so hard the paper tore slightly. Arthur stepped forward and snatched the document before the ink was even dry. He checked the signatures, notarized them with his own stamp, and placed them in his briefcase. "It is done," Arthur said. I looked at my parents one last time. They looked hollowed out. Empty husks. "Get out of my sight," I said. They didn't argue. They didn't scream. They stood up like elderly people, their joints stiff, their backs bent. They grabbed their coats and shuffled toward the door. They didn't look at me. They didn't look at the judge. They just wanted to escape the room where their lives had ended. Arthur and I waited a full minute after they left. Then, Arthur looked at me and checked his watch. "The elevator takes 45 seconds to reach the lobby," Arthur noted. "They should be stepping out right about now." "Do you think they are waiting?" I asked. "The Economic Crimes Unit?" Arthur smiled, a shark-like grin. "I sent them the insurance forgery evidence 3 days ago. Willow, the videos were just for us. The forgery? That is a federal felony. They have been parked in the lobby since 8 this morning." We walked to the window and looked down. 42 stories below. The street was bustling. But right in front of the building entrance, I could see the flashing lights. We took the elevator down. I wanted to see it. I needed to see it. When the doors opened in the lobby, the scene was chaotic. My parents hadn't even made it to the sidewalk. A team of officers in suits and windbreakers blocked their path. I saw the flash of badges. I saw Marcus try to run. A pathetic, stumbling attempt that ended with him being slammed against the revolving door. Elena was standing in the center of the atrium. She was screaming. "Do you know who I am? I am Elena Kestrel. Take your hands off me." A female officer spun her around. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut. Click, 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 cut through her screams. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The press was there, too. The irony was poetic. Elena had invited the media to the courthouse earlier in the week to film her victory. Now, those same cameramen, tipped off by a concerned citizen, Leo, our digital forensics expert, were filming her perp walk. I stood by the elevator banks, watching. Elena looked up as the officer shoved her toward the waiting cruiser. Her eyes met mine across the lobby. Her mask didn't just crack. It shattered. She saw me standing there, calm and untouched. While she was being dragged away like a common criminal, she opened her mouth to scream at me, but the officer pushed her head down and guided her into the back seat. The door slammed shut. Marcus was loaded into a separate car. Weeping openly, the sirens wailed, and the convoy pulled away, disappearing into the city traffic. "Tax evasion, insurance fraud, and conspiracy," Arthur said. Standing beside me, "They will be lucky if they get out in 15 years. "They wanted the money," I whispered. "And now they will not even have canteen money," Arthur said. "Come on, Willow, let's go home." I drove back to Silver Oak alone. The drive felt different this time. The menacing gray sky had cleared, revealing a brilliant, piercing blue. The snow on the trees glittered like diamonds. When I pulled up to the gate, I didn't feel the dread I had felt for the last month. The house didn't loom. It stood. It stood proud and tall, a survivor of the storm, just like me. I parked the car and walked straight to the front door. I unlocked it with my key. I walked through the silent halls. I went to the great hall, where the funeral reception had been. I went to the dining room, where the poison had been poured. I opened the curtains. I threw open the French doors. I let the cold, clean winter air rush in, chasing out the smell of stale perfume and secrets. I walked out to the winter garden and unlocked the sculpting studio. The bust of my grandfather was still there, guarding the secret room. But I didn't need the secret room anymore. I grabbed a dust sheet and threw it over the bust. "Your watch is ended," I said to the statue. I walked around the studio, pulling the covers off the other sculptures. Beatrice's work, her angels, her horses, her abstract shapes of freedom. They deserved to be seen. I stood in the center of the room, the sunlight pouring in through the skylights, illuminating the dust motes. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I wasn't going to live here alone like a recluse. That was what my parents wanted. They wanted me to be the ice queen, like they thought Beatrice was. No. I pulled out my phone and called Julian Thorne, the director of Ethelgard Arts who had fired me. "Willow," he answered, sounding surprised. "I heard the news. The arrest is everywhere. I owe you an apology. We would like to offer you your job back." "I don't want the job, Julian," I said. "I have a better offer. I own a historic estate with a private art collection worth millions. I am turning Silver Oak into a foundation, a museum dedicated to female sculptors. And the main house? It is going to be a sanctuary, a legal aid and housing center for elderly victims of financial abuse." There was a silence on the line. "Willow, that is incredibly generous." "I need a curator," I said. "Are you interested?" I hung up and walked out into the garden. The snow was deep, but I didn't mind. I walked past the rose bushes, past the fountain, until I reached the small family cemetery at the edge of the woods. The grave was fresh. The earth was still mounded. The headstone had been installed just yesterday. A simple slab of gray granite. Beatrice Kestrel, artist, mother, queen. I knelt in the snow. The cold seeped into my knees, but I didn't feel it. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the heavy brass key with the kestrel bird on the bow. The key that had opened the truth. The key that had saved my life. I placed it gently on top of the headstone. The brass gleamed against the gray stone. "We did it, Grandma," I whispered. The wind caught my words and carried them up into the trees. "The vultures are gone. The house is safe. And I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sharp, clean air of freedom. I am standing still in the eye of the storm, and I am the only one left standing. I stood up, brushed the snow from my knees, and turned back toward the house. My house. It glowed in the setting sun, warm and inviting, for the first time in 20 years. It looked like a home, and that is how I taught my parents the most expensive lesson of their lives. Never underestimate a grandmother who loves her grandchild more than life itself. If you enjoyed this story, please like and share. Justice sometimes arrives late, but it always arrives in style. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to hear your thoughts. Where are you tuning in from? Are you listening while driving, working, or just relaxing at home? Please drop a comment below to let me know. And don't forget to subscribe to the Blue Payback channel. Hit the like button and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to me.